One of the biggest misconceptions about America is that it was founded on free trade, but the first thing Jefferson and Hamilton did was impose a tariff, restricting trade to keep out superior British goods in order to spur American manufacturing, then passed congressional legislation protecting those U.S. businesses. In order to initiate economic growth, the government immediately intervened to commission ordinances that set up states, issued land grants and government bonds, built roads, canals, bridges, railways, and passed laws that spurred homesteading. The dictionary definition of socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Nowhere does it say that things should be run by the federal government, though that is one form it can take. However, the core notion of socialism is that workers own and control their own labor, as well as the wealth they produce, and that communities run their own lives, allowing everyone an equal say in the organizations in which they willingly participate. Capitalism, not socialism, redistributes wealth. If under true socialism, workers controlled their own labor and had a say in what was done with the wealth they created, they wouldn't pay themselves starvation wages while the people under whom they toiled accumulated obscene amounts of wealth. It is capitalism that takes the wealth that workers produce and gives it to the managers, the bosses, and the shareholders. Under capitalism, say you work in a factory that my grandmother bought stock in, and when she died, her stock passed to me. I've never set foot in your factory. I don't even know what you produce, but every month I get a check in my mailbox for doing absolutely nothing. The wealth that you work to produce and should be yours is redistributed to me. The truth is, American culture, or rather American cultures, have already been destroyed by 20th century corporations. Capitalism replaced traditional American values such as thrift, self-effacement, and the community with corporate values such as greed, consumerism, and the cult of the self. Individual regional identities across America with their own unique history and traditions were all destroyed and replaced with the homogenization of corporate culture. My own hometown in central Pennsylvania, which used to be filled with mom-and-pop stores, bowling alleys, and small family businesses, is now like every other town in America, filled with strip malls that contain the same corporate juggernauts from sea to shining sea. The small local bookstore, once staffed with people who loved what they did, knew who you were, and always had a new recommendation for you, is now a T-Mobile kiosk. Capitalism, which is based off private property, deprives the majority of the population from obtaining the means of survival without paying someone to gain access to those means. And without having access to your own means of survival, you are forced to rent yourself to an employer on whom you are now dependent. Take the latest altercation with the striking workers of the UAW. As they were striking, management stripped them of their health care on a whim because under capitalism, management knows workers are dependent on them for affordable health care. Profiting off basic needs and restricting land access to create a working class dependent on precarious wage labor, all justified by the right to vote. But land, houses, food, and water are not on the ballot. It is true that most socialists want to abolish private property, but it's important to distinguish between personal property, state and private property, and communal property. Personal property would be your car, your home, your computer, the land you use, and yes, your toothbrush. And in a socialist society, all those things would be yours and no one else's. What you couldn't lay claim to are things that you don't use, but would purchase in order to restrict others from using without having to pay you a fee. Like if there was a mountain people climbed, under socialism, we wouldn't allow a wealthy person to buy that mountain and then start charging people for doing something that they were already doing for free. Private property, along with state property, includes things people use together but do not own, such as uncultivated land, the means of production, communication, and transportation. Instead of being owned and controlled by the people who use them, as they would be in a socialist society, in this capitalist society, they're owned by a small group of wealthy industrialists or state bureaucrats who we must pay. Capitalists are greedy, but not any more so than the workers they employ. Greed, after all, is a normal human emotion. But the fact is, it's not greed that drives the owners to exploit their workers. It's the logic of the capitalist system. The capitalist accumulates profits in order to obtain other tools to secure his place in the market and rid himself of his competition, not because he wants to put others out of business, but because he has no other option. Because if he does not do that, that will be done to him. It is true that greed is a normal human trait, but so are many other things like empathy, loyalty, and solidarity. Capitalism is built to reinforce and reward the worst aspects of human nature. But wouldn't it be more beneficial to all to design a society that acknowledged and reconciled the less attractive aspects of human nature while reinforcing our more positive attributes? At this point, it's common knowledge that the land of the free ironically has the highest prison population in the world. In fact, no state socialist nation has ever come close to locking up the percentage of people the United States has. We are 4% of the world's population and hold 22% of the world's prisoners. That's because we have private, capitalist, for-profit prison industrial complex. Our capitalist system, through exploitation of the workforce, makes production so efficient that a sizable portion of the population is not needed, and instead of letting us go to waste, capitalism commodifies our lives by locking us in cages where we generate $30,000 to $40,000 a year for the ruling class, incentivizing incarceration. Thanks for watching.